the next session is from Bernaderr Szél. Okay. Yeah, you're ready. Okay, so Claire, Bernadette is here. Are you able to host now?
Yes, remember to speak now.
Super. So the stage is all yours. Okay, Bernadette, so Claire is gonna be your host, and I'm here with the backup. Okay.
So the floor is open for Bernaderr Szél. Thank you so much for being here. And we heard, we started off with a story about crisis. I did a small presentation on how we move from scenario to narrative story. And now Bernaderr Szél is going to join us. I look forward to hearing her. Can we bring her up? Is she in the room as a panelist? Let's see. And make sure. All right. I don't think I have the capacity to bring her up. All right, there we go. All right, Bernadette, I'm promoting you to panelist. All right, Bernadette, you are here as a panelist. Please feel free to turn on your camera and let's see if we can hear you. There you go.
Hello.
Okay.
Greetings to all of you. We are going to deliver a little presentation. We are going to use a PPT, and my dear colleague, PhD student Ana Maria Ach, will talk first, and then I will take the floor. So finger crossed to get the presentation. Yeah, super. So, greetings to everyone. First, let us thank you all for joining us today. We are very pleased to be presenting you our research on the area of women's role in public life to reach the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. First, let us start by telling you a little bit about our background. My colleague is Bernaderr Szél. She is a researcher, economist, and futurist, and she has her PhD degree in sociology. She was a member of the Hungarian parliament between 2012 and 2022. My name is Ana Maria Ach. I'm presently a PhD student in Hungary at the Doctoral School of Entrepreneurship and Business, and I was the colleague of Bernadette during her life in parliament. We have been very much inspired to look the gender balance area from the viewpoint of liminality. The international community has set the goals regarding the gender balance, but we just don't move enough fast to reach them. The question is that, what this area will look like now, who is responsible for it, and why it doesn't change faster. So we are in the transition now. We have the goal, but we can't reach it. How shall this world look like if we fail to achieve our goals? Let's start with a question. What year is it today? The answer seems evident because today is 2023. However, if we ask it from a strategic view, what year is it today to reach the gender equality goals in political representation by 2030? The answer is rather shocking because in that case, we are in 1890. So let's travel back in time and imagine that we are in Paris around 1890. You probably would travel by a horse-ride carriage or by a steam locomotive to this conference. And on the streets, you would meet women who fight for their right to vote on the elections in France. Since that time, many steps have been made forward, and innovations in mobility offer fast, comfortable, sustainable modes of transportation. Technological innovations make it possible to attend on this conference in Paris without being here personally, but online with a zero emission, and women have the right to vote. However, if we think of the pace of the development of innovation and technology compared to the results achieved in gender equality, we see a huge gap. And therefore, the aim of our research is to deeply understand that when we talk about sustainable development goals, why women's voice and representation in political decision-making are essential. First, we identified the concept of gender equality. To do so, we use the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which cover in Goal 5, the gender equality. These goals were adopted in 2050 by 193 United Nations countries. Its agenda targets 17 areas of action, and gender equality is crucial for all these areas of sustainable development. Second, we conducted a research on the diverse perspectives that women bring in and represent in political decision making. And finally, third, we envision the future without reaching the gender equality goals. Our methodology had two main methods, the horizon scanning and the futures wheel. By using the horizon scanning method, we aim to identify the current and the emerging trends of gender equality. We consider the role of women in all the 17 areas of sustainable development, from reducing poverty to promoting health, education, climate change, and the well-being of people. Based on the reports of the UN and the UN Women on the progress of the countries, the first and the most pronounced difficulty we have faced was the lack of gender-specific data sets. And this makes it impossible to monitor the progress of gender equality, as well as without adequate and accurate data on women, it is extremely challenging to achieve real results in terms of closing the gender gap. However, we collected the data, and based on our results of the horizon scanning, we created the so-called futures wheel to discuss all the plausible consequences, future consequences of gender inequality in political decision-making. That was evident from the beginning that the 2030 goals of gender equality lack progress. So we asked the question, what will happen with our work on the path of sustainability if we don't reach women's political empowerment by 2030? By scanning the political environment of gender equality, the worrying situation has emerged that we are not only far away from reaching the equal representation of women, but we have serious gaps to fill before we reach our goals. Regarding national parliaments, only 14% of the countries have women head of states or government, and less than 1/3 of the representatives are women. It is quite clear that at levels where there is less power, there are more women in position. When we go to the local municipality levels, slightly more than 1/3 of the representatives are women. If the trend goes in the future as now, we need 140 years for equal representation of women at all levels of political decision making. So let's go back to the original question, what year is it today? Obviously it's 2023, but as we discussed above, we need 140 years to reach the equal representation of women in political decision making, but we have only 7 years until the target year 2030. Already it is obvious that women will not be equally represented by 2030. Okay, it won't happen in 7 years, but it doesn't mean that we can give up. And our present research is one of the wake-up calls to action. So let us discuss what our world will look like without the equal representation of women in decision making.
Okay, thank you, Anna Maria. It's really an honor to be here. And let's continue. We picked up this title for our research project because we see there is a visible connection between representation and the issues that must be represented. It is as simple as we say that if we don't have enough people to represent an issue, then that issue won't be represented and the change will not happen. We get stuck in the present and the desired futures will not be realized. As Anna Maria said, the present is very severe, but we mustn't give up. And in the second part of our presentation, we would look into 4 important areas that significantly and thoroughly affect women's life. Changes are inevitable, we can see, if we aim at a desirable future for all of us. Our 4 areas are economic context, economic aspects, the social aspects, violence related to women, and climate change. I must say that because of the lack of time, we can't go very deeply into these into these territories. We can do it in the article, but we would like to talk about that because it's important to see the whole picture. When we talk about the economic aspects, we looked into 3 sub-areas. And unfortunately here, neither justice or being fair nor efficiency seems to be an organizing principle now. And it should be, because we can see in many areas that being fair on women and being rational in economic terms come hand in hand with each other. Still, society doesn't organize it like that, or at least not fast enough. Yeah, the first territory is women in managerial positions. In business life, there is a very basic, very simple indicator that shows that to which extent women are invited into high-level decision-making in companies. And this is the ratio or percentage of managerial positions held by women. It is currently 28.2%. And if nothing changes, it increases up to 30% by 2030, and this is disparately low and also irrational from financial terms, because promoting women in business results in better business results. So it is financially worth letting women in high-level decision-making. And yes, when we talk about work, many of us associate to jobs with salary, but we also need to consider who takes care for the unpaid work in the households with the families. And this is our second sub-area, the unpaid work as such. Globally, 75% of the unpaid work is accomplished by women. And this has also very severe consequences, because it is easy to see if someone devotes more time for the unpaid work, that has less time for paid work or education or recreation, which has serious effects on deepening disparities and less GDP on the macro level. And staying on the macro level, there is already a visible imbalance between high and low-income countries regarding this issue, because unpaid work accounts for 50% in high-income countries and goes up to 80% in low-income countries, which means the poorer a country is, the women get even more heavily overburdened by the work which is not paid, and so they have less time and energy for working for money, or less chance, which creates a vicious circle at the end. And when talking about the macro scale and getting back to the United States, McKinsey accomplished research and came to the conclusion that between 1970 and 2009, 38 million women joined the US labor force. And without this, the national GDP would have been 25% smaller. So unpaid work is important, it is precious, and first of all, yeah, it has to be done. But research shows that instead of burdening all of it to one distinguished family member, which is usually the mother, it is worth sharing it among family members. And yes, we reached at this point. The third aspect we have to take into account when we talk about desirable futures and representation of women, it's the gender pay gap and gender budgeting. The reality is far from the level we could expect from this century. Currently, in 53 countries, the law doesn't mandate equal remuneration for work of equal value, and the global gender pay gap is 23%. It is easier to understand if you look at the problem like this. In 2020, for each US dollar earned by a man, a woman earned 83 cents, so significantly less. And as we have seen in business and as we have seen in unpaid work as well, gender pay gap is also a very irrational phenomenon, because inequality in payment contributes to increased poverty and negatively affects education, nutrition, and health outcomes, not only for the women, but also for all family members, household members, and also the children. So at this point, we are moving on the social context. We were almost already there. And in this respect, we must begin with education, which is, or at least would be, a very basic and efficient tool to get closer to gender equality. But in education, the present situation on the global scale is far from good. One example, women still account for almost 2/3 of all adults unable to read. And although giving education for women is good for both genders and also for the children, the whole scene doesn't move fast enough. And we can see that the family representation is an important asset in this respect as well, because we see a certain moving together between investing in education and the number of gender balanced legislators. We see the same phenomenon with corruption, by the way. We have to investigate what is behind this correlation, but at least on the data level, we can see that, and it's important to see that. Poverty, women are more exposed to poverty, and if you create a trend extrapolation, it shows a very desperate picture, because to 2030, 8% of the world's female population will still be living on less than $2.15 a day. Again, we are the vicious circle, because poverty means more time on unpaid work, and poverty deepens with less education. So it is important to break this vicious circle and make a very definite change. We could talk a lot about this with a lot of data, but I wanted to mention one important aspect. It's the stereotypes issue, because I know it's hard to measure, but it's there, and it's deeply rooted and present across all countries. It's important how we think about women, because it influences what goes on in the world. And research shows that it can undermine the whole 2030 agenda. So we can say for sure that the less stereotypes, the more results we can expect. And yes, we arrive to violence, because protecting women and girls remain a very huge debt for the future. Yeah, stereotypes can, and they do a lot of harm, and protecting them, as I said, it's a debt. And we have to say that we can make harm to each other with words. Now we have a word for that. It is called political abusement. And it is given for female politicians in more than double dose compared to their male colleagues. And the tendencies are not positive at all, because in virtual spaces and in real life, it moves currently to a worse and worse level. And it's a hindering effect to women from entering the political scene. There is domestic violence, safe cities for women, online harassment, a lot of issues we have to talk about when we talk about violence reaching women. I just want to mention here that, and also in the article, we look into more types of that. But for now, we would like to emphasize that when talking about war and war crime against women, we must say that we must protect women. But when we are talking about peace, we must say that we have to involve women. Because the future without us, that would be pretty arrogant. And we can have a very important role in reaching peace, because analysis of 182 peace agreements signed between 1989 and 2011 demonstrated that when women are included in peace processes, there is a 20% increase in the probability of an agreement lasting at least 2 years. and a 35% increase in the probability of an agreement lasting at least 15 years. So women have to be at the table, because the results will be better. Research show that. When we talk about the future, we always have to talk about climate change. This is not only a female issue, it is an issue for all of us. But women are more exposed to it as we see it, and also it is worth involving women to finding solutions. The very special knowledge of women in the globe about agriculture and forestry can help a lot in solving our common problems. And the inclusion of women in climate discussions, we can see that it leads to improved outcomes of climate-related projects and policies as well. Because we are lack of time, I would like to almost close this presentation, but I have to share with you our common, with Anna Maria, our common project and discussion. Because when we were working on this research, that we are going to continue in the future, there were some important words that come up almost every day. It was transition period, liminality, old stereotypes and new challenges, and the future shaping power. So it shows to me that when talking about women issues, we really have to find a new thinking to reach our goals. I would like to share with you 3 important outcomes for the time being. The first is uncertainty is the new certainty. We have good goals, but we are not there yet. And the present looks very devastating, but the goals are too important for both genders. So we mustn't give up for the sake of both genders. We have seen also, when we were talking about these issues and researching the data, that people say always that it costs money to reach gender balance. But many sub-areas we are looking into prove that involvement of women results in a better quality future for both genders. Countries, companies, that families can be better off with gender balance. So it's not only putting money into this issue, we can also gain money when we get closer to our goals. Yes, and we hear a lot of excuses. There are more important problems than gender equality, wars and hunger and poverty. Of course, these are very important problems, but the desired future emerges with more chance when gender balance is there. And yes, if we talk about the money we have to put into this project, we also have to talk about the future, how it would look like if we don't put this money into this project, and it is pretty devastating. So we have a long way to go and we have short time, but we really have to invest what we can so that all humankind can reach a better world for 2030 and beyond. I think time is up and we are ready for the questions. We have to check the chat platform.
Yes, I would like to start the question and answer with the question: is gender balance the same as gender equality?
Well, gender balance, it means that for us, for the most of the territories, we can say that 50-50 would be the best balance. So if, for example, a board there would be gender balance, then then 50% of the board would be female and the other half would be men. But of course, it's important to get closer to our goals and to make it step by step. But as we can see, gender balance is the best option if we have gender equality in this sense.
I have a lot of questions because I believe that gender balance doesn't necessarily equate to depends on obviously the country, the situation, but gender balance doesn't also equate to any transition in the behavior that you're looking for. I mean, because if depending on how the particular person in leadership was groomed for leadership, that gender form may very well be the same form as what was there before. So is it that we're looking for a number, or are we looking for a certain quality? How do you put the quality of what you're looking for into your deliberation? If it's just the number, or percentage, or is it really something different? I think your metrics may really need to be rethought, because I think this metric of numbers has not really necessarily brought us what we're looking for in terms of the quality of life or we're looking to create in countries. Is it better to look at quality of life issues around gender challenges like healthcare and those are real issues with healthcare and domestic violence and other issues that are relatively more important in people's lives than just a job title?
Well, I would like to share a lot of thoughts about this, but okay. So for example, when we were talking about GDP, you know, there is a lot of criticism against GDP and they are valid and they are important. But when we were looking in this territory, we can see that about quantity, we don't have enough numbers. So it's there. So gender related data is hard to find in many terms. And I'm very skeptical when we talk about averages, for example, because, you know, if something is an outlier scale in a population, then if you measure an average, it can disguise that there is an outlier. So it's dangerous. And we have this criticism towards all kinds of quantitative data, but we need quantitative data. We can see, for example, when we talk about the Parliamentarian Assembly, that only a very little percentage of women sitting there in the assembly. We cannot make the quality, measure the quality of the parliamentarians, but we can see how many of them actually sit there. And we can see that the less power, and Anna Maria said also that if you talk about less power, the more women can get to the floor. So it shows that something goes on with power and with the gender balance and also gender equality. Yes, about qualitative issues, it is important to see what is behind the numbers. But we need both actually. So I think we need both. We need both to see the clear picture. But really, it's very hard to get right numbers about women, women on the floor, business and politics and other areas as well. I'm not sure I answered your question because
No, you did, but that's okay. I mean, I do agree that we need more numbers, more statistics, but I think the statistics need to be nuanced, because if indeed you have a situation in a particular parliament, and you have I know you need sometimes you need a certain critical mass in a parliament of women who believe the same things, because you can have a parliamentary system where you have women who don't believe the same things and you still don't move anything along. So I think we need to focus more so as opposed to specific. I think there are two separate issues. Number one, we need to get the numbers just to know what the numbers are in terms of the GDP or SDG, whatever. But I think more importantly, we need to define what does a society in which the important roles in which women can play in their society in terms of ability to use their brain as it has been endowed, right? So whatever that is, rocket scientist, engineer, teacher, whatever, the ability to occupy spaces of power without fear of being, let's say, attacked for that. So whether it's 1 or 10, for me, it's the same difference. So maybe we need in the gender equality movement to focus more on defining what that quality of life would be, how that quality of life will be different for people in a given society. Bearing in mind, each society is different. So if we look at Afghanistan versus a UAE, for example, I mean, there are two countries which are both Muslim, but they're very different outcomes for the real role that females are playing in leadership. And so I think we must go beyond, let's say, the number statistic to come up with some metric that we can use to measure how women feel about the quality of their life and the equality of their opportunities, and have that be a more equally important statistic that we gather.
Yeah, and also we have to be very conscious about statistics. For example, there is a correlation between corruption and women in politics, for example, and many people translate it to a fact that women are less corrupt. So because if we have more women in a society in politics, then corruption goes down, and this is because women are less corrupt. But the solution is not that. The solution is that society that puts women in politics, to the floor, it is more likely to fight corruption. So behind the two numbers, there is a society which is for being which wants gender balance in politics and also transparency with our common money. So it's important how we also interpret these data. I support this idea to look into it, but it's behind that. We have to be very cautious, and it is also important to combine the methods, qualitative and quantitative methods.
Yeah. We see our time is up, unfortunately. Paula dos Santos said, greater numbers of policymakers who are women mean a greater energy and focus is provided to social issues which keep women in disadvantaged situation in society. I personally would, early in the 2014-15, I did a series of interviews on futures of women, and I'd certainly love to probably meet up with you guys after this and have a conversation, more conversation on your research, and maybe have Human Futures magazine, which, I am editor at large, maybe do something with this conversation on the futures of women. Where do we see it going, and how we might do things differently? And that's an open invitation for anybody who wants to write on that theme or have a debate, which we can translate into written form. Thank you so much for participating, and thank you so much for bringing this to our attention. Paula dos Santos, thank you so much also for your comment.